just get started without him. First, let me give a review of the stories we're going to talk about today. The first story is about neuromarketing, and major corporations now are applying the lessons of cognitive neuroscience to get the American people to buy more. That's what we're good at using our science for in America, is getting people to buy more stuff. The next story is about a 3D printed house that is printed using not some fancy concrete or building material. It's printed using clay from local sources. So it's a 3D house that is printed from ingredients that you can find locally. So that is a real big difference in how you might make houses environmentally green and all of those things. And the next story is one that I've been talking about in ways for some months. And this story says half of the world's fossil fuel assets could become worthless by 2036. They're saying that kind of sooner than I thought, but I've been expecting to see this story any day. And it's, to me, one of the hopeful stories that is in the news. Then I have a second environmental story today that I feel is related to the first one. And it's one of the real positive things that's come out of COP26. And the world's biggest banks have agreed to basically over the next 30 years, of course, too slow, too late, but to stop investing in fossil fuels. So I think that is an important story, and those are the kind of things that really bring about these changes, because if you can't get money, then you can't build your thing. The next story, the material story, this time is a story about a wonderful new material that can make high density solid state batteries. And this wonderful material is not graphene. It's wood. You've heard about the high-tech wood. Well, this is it. And then for my space and physics story, I have a story that is something that I've wondered about for a long time, and that is death in space. What happens to the bodies? How do you dispose of bodies when they're not in an environment where the natural process of decomposition work? It's an unusual problem, and with more people traveling in space, it's a problem that we're going to have to face probably sooner than we think. Then my story on animals and genetics is about ivory hunting drives evolution of elephants to become tuskless. They're hunted for their tusks. And so guess what? This latest generation doesn't have as many tusks. So that's evolution and natural or selection working out pretty fast within one generation. Then my story on the brain is that researchers have been able to boost human mental function with brain stimulation. This may have a lot of impacts both for many of the brain diseases. It may also have impact for folks like you and me. Put a little hat on, have it tickle your brain and make your brain better. Who wouldn't want one of those? I would, depending, as long as I could buy it for cheap. I can't pay 7,000 pounds for it, but. And then the last story, the medical story, is we know, because of COVID and things like that, of some of the wonderful things that our body can do with antibodies and how they help us fight off diseases and things like this. And this particular discovery has them showing how they can use antibodies to slow down aging by destroying the old senescent cells that are in the body. Because it turns out your body's aging and your brain aging, while they still don't understand it, one of the things that they know that is the case is there get to be this proliferation of old senescent cells that just kind of take up room and still don't do any function. And what they have found is that removing those senescent cells makes the organism act younger. So maybe there will be a vaccine for us to take against aging. Would you take that aging vaccine? Would the anti-COVID vaxxers take the anti-aging vaccine, I wonder?
I would have to think about that.
Anyway, so that's what we have for today. And so to start from the top, let me talk about neuromarketing. And I put this as the top story because what they are now starting to be able to do is so powerful and so frightening that I think we at least need to be aware of it. I'm not sure how we change our behavior or make it protect ourselves from it. I don't know if we can. But, the choice in America of the product that is typically bought is not based on tangible factors like which one is the best or its price or its effectiveness. Most of the decisions, they say 95% of the decisions are based on feeling, not kind of rational cognitive things. And one of the things that these brain neuroscientists have been able to do actually is then look at different brain parts and figure out which parts of the brain are involved in what kind of decisions when you're interested in things and when you're deciding to buy things. And they are figuring out how to use that information to, shall we say, influence your purchasing. Neuromarketing is an offshoot of the field of cognitive neuroscience. And one of the architects and pioneers in this area says neuromarketing goes beyond what people can articulate. So if that's not scary, I don't know what is. So again, 95% of the purchases are emotionally driven, not based on reasonableness. And these decisions don't happen in the higher part of the brain. They happen actually in the primitive part of the brain that some people call reptilian. It's got the limbic system like the amygdala that deals with emotions, and they've been able to see it in the cortex of the brain where uncertainty and conflicting sentiments reside. So they're able to see all of this activity within the brain, and then being able to see it, their hope and their record shows that they can manipulate your reaction with the help of data analysis and AI. An early study they did here was on Coke versus Pepsi. Which do you like the best? And uh, it turns out in blind tests where people just take the taste of the drink, people choose Pepsi overwhelmingly. If they know the brands they're drinking, people choose Coke overwhelmingly. So something is going on besides the quality of the product, and they're able to demonstrate it with their. And what they found investigating the brain response to Coke versus Pepsi to an ambiguous choice is when they didn't know what the choice was, when they actually had to taste it and make their choice that way, that used one particular part of the prefrontal cortex. Though when they knew what it was, though, they found other parts of the brain involved, including the hippocampus, and this was an indication that the people were somehow retrieving prior experiences connected to that brand. And so a part of their experience tasting the Coke was also based on all the memories of their tasting a Coke before. And so it's this dealing with this branded thing is a lot different mentally than just deciding which one you like better. So of course, one of the best examples of neuromarketing and these kind of ideas was Trump's campaign in 2016, where he was relying heavily on digital conversion technology using big data, artificial intelligence, and social networks that allowed him to micro-target voters with extraordinary precision. And this was based on an idea, cognitive psychology, known as congruency theory, which suggests that voters will select politicians whose perceived traits match their own. So they collected massive amounts of data, used machine learning algorithms to observe and test and analyze all of this data to understand the political relevance, and then developed psychometric profiles which told them who to target based on this. And uh, neuromarketers dubbed this tactic, quote, the buy button, because they felt, to define the political issues that can be pushed like buttons to encourage the voters to buy. So that is kind of the risk of neuromarketing. And because of this risk, there's presently a lot of debate about it, whether this is a good thing, whether it's a legitimate approach, and what the consequences might be. And of course, this is a technology area. So in spite of the debates about whether it's good or not, the technology guys are still going forward, doing whatever they do. And recently they've advanced brain imaging and data collection and cognitive language processing and been able to transform neural marketing from some hodgepodge of episodic thing into an organized new field of study with well-respected neuroscientists. So neuromarketing, while there are doubts about it, is going big academically and in terms of research money. I'm sure it's going big because these companies see that they can use it to increase their profits by selling more stuff. And it still is too early to say how effective all these neuromarketing practices are going to be or how accurate they are. But even though they don't understand if it works, there are a bunch of small and medium-sized companies and startups that are focusing on the area of neuromarketing. So it's a big thing that is going on in business and where business meets academic science. And already examples of what is happening is there's one company that 5 years ago, they launched a platform where anybody could use data points from smartwatches and apply algorithms that inferred brain activity. And so they're able to get information from your smartwatch that can help them figure out when you're going to have psychological immersion, attention, and emotionality, and going to buy something. And so they have already learned how to use your smartwatch to watch the buying process. And the last thing that I have to say is the people who understand this say abuse seems inevitable. So what do you think?
I think that, first of all, I don't have the problem with Pepsi and Coke because I don't drink either one. But beyond that, there's a lot of resources on the net for finding out more details about products. Consumer Report being an obvious site, but there's a lot of other places you can find opinions, pro and cons of the different products. And I want to say that my dear wife, when we go shopping, she would look at the content of each product and she said, we don't want that. There's a low fiber content or there's too much sugar. So we do have resources to counter that.
Well, that's very good. And that means that they say since 95% of the buying decisions are based on emotion, this must be the other 5%.
Doesn't mean we don't have emotions.
No, it doesn't. It just means here you're doing it cognitively. Right. And so you're using the higher brain instead of the lower brain. Yeah. Congratulations.
Well, I'm sure you do the same, Richard.
I don't know. We'll see. Well, my wife, the similarity is my wife is the one who looks at the list of ingredients and says, well, you don't buy it.
So she's part of the 5%.
Yes, and I just take advantage of it.
Yeah, but that's all based upon prior experience too, which they referred to. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that experience is good and sometimes it's not so good.
Mhm.
I still feel as though I'm being manipulated many times.
Well, you are. They spend a lot of money trying to do it. And if you didn't feel manipulated, they would be sad.
I think this is scary.
I
Okay.
would like to see a test done where experienced salesmen went up against the algorithms, because I rather think that a lot of this stuff is intuitive, and salesmen have learned to identify where they can make the most sales.
Well, they've used lots of resources, and I know salesmen that there's a component of it that is intuitive. I also know salesmen that have trained themselves pretty carefully in behavioral things. I think neurolinguistic programming was popular, for example, as a sales tool so that you could watch the guy's eyes and figure out how he was keying emotionally on what you're saying. But that's right. That would be a good test, though, I think, to take one of these great salesmen and have a sell-off between them and an AI salesman. And it might be like this computer playing Go against people. It was not very good. Then it got to be good enough to beat the best. Then it got to be good enough to crush the best. So it might take it a while. But when they get it developed, be careful of your phone ringing, because they may be after you. They may have heard of you speaking on your computer and figured out keywords.
Maybe we're being observed right now.
So I have to just say that the doorbell that just rang a couple of minutes ago was somebody who came to the door and was trying to sell me a landscaping system.
Okay. Okay. Now for the technology story. Often I talk in the technology stuff about 3D printing, and this time I'm going to talk about 3D printing your houses. And if you look at this picture here, this is the first house that was built by this, and this is a low carbon housing prototype that is 3D printed using clay from a local river.
Wow.
And the name of the company is now Tekla, T-E-C-L-A, which is a combination of technology and clay. And again, it's built by clay from a nearby riverbed. And this particular house is formed of two connected domes. It's they say there's a living room, dining area, sleeping area, but it's about 600 square feet. That's pretty small. Carol and I, when we first moved to India, were in a place that was about 600 square feet. It was small, but it was still livable, and we lived there happily for a year. And it's made up of 350 stacked layers of 3D printed clay. Let's look at it some more. This is inside the house. That looks nice. I would like to have more furniture in it. And this is another view of the house from the outside with that pleasant little arch and the doorway. This is the skylight in both of the rooms. And this is a construction shot. And you can see the 3D printer structure there with the two printing arms, and both the arms can print simultaneously. You also see that what they're printing is kind of circular, which makes a sense given the design of the construction equipment. You can also see that it would be easy to say build a third room, and so you could have a 900 square foot structure instead of a 600 square foot structure, and that starts to seem pretty livable. And here you see it under construction, so it's building up the walls. And if you look at that honeycomb pattern of the wall, you see it better here. You can see that it's made in a way where it reinforces itself, and in a way that it's got to be great insulation against the exterior weather. So it's going to be cooler when you need it to be cooler, and warmer when you need it to be warmer. And now it looks like the individual modules, I'm not sure exactly on here. It says the modules can be built in about 200 hours. That's less than a week and a half to print one of those things. And the amount of energy it uses to print the house is about 6 kilowatts of energy. To give you a perspective there, that's as much energy as a Mexican house uses in one day to power itself up, or in a North American house, an American house uses in about an hour. So it's these are pretty energy efficient, and it's recyclable, low carbon, climate affordable, and sustainable home. And so it looks like that this kind of thing can change what is possible and available for a house. It has to be fairly inexpensive if you're using clay from the local clay bed, and you don't need labor, it prints itself. By the way, there's almost no construction waste, so it's good that way as well. And it's a sign of what we are going to be able to do in the future. And I think brilliant idea. Now, I don't know if the clay has any outer coating. I would hope it does, because I would be afraid for my clay house to melt in the rain. Do you think they thought about that?
I would think so.
So what do you think?
I wonder how much time it takes to program the machine and bring the thing to the place to build it, and then set it up, the machine itself.
It looks like, from what I see there of the machine was on this hexagonal frame with 3 supports. And I bet it would take less than a day or 2 of labor to move it to another site, especially if you were building a housing tract.
Yeah.
So again, much more efficient, has to be very much lower cost.
It
Richard,
seems to me that,
in,
it seems to me that the building had no windows.
That building had no windows. It just had those big doors. You could probably design it with windows too.
Yeah.
Now, they did say that the furniture was at least partially made by the 3D printer. And that the whole idea of that was interesting to me. What if your 3D printing was good enough then, while it was printing, not only to print your structure, but a lot of the furniture in it? Wow, that does everything at once.
Richard, in South America and Argentina, poor people, they build houses out of clay. They put some posts and they put barbed wire around the post, and then they fill it with clay, and that survives rain and everything else.
Okay. Okay. So you're saying I don't have to worry about my clay house melting.
You can relax.
Okay. I was afraid I was going to have to build a big kiln around it to fire it like a pot. I hope not. Okay. So,
That's right. Like with regular clay, it's not fired.
right. Yes. You know, even the bricks are fired.
Hmm.
Okay, then let us go on. And the next story, I believe, is one of the ones that is a real positive story. And they are saying that about half of the world's fossil fuel assets will be worthless by 2036. So take that, you big oil companies, under a net zero transition, which is presently underway. And part of what they see is that renewables and freed up investments will more than make up for the economic losses in the global economy. So they're saying not only can we eliminate fossil fuels, but as we do it, it's actually going to free up money in the economy, and it frees it up because now places like Japan have to spend all that money on the foreign oil, and instead they can spend the money on stuff in Japan. And maybe that would be good, you know, to have the money yourself instead of spend it there. Now, they do say this is going to have some financial impact, and that is that about 10 to 15 trillion dollars in assets will be left stranded. So the big oil companies are going to be sitting on a pile of $15 trillion worth of worthless oil. Too bad for them. And now, of course, we're in a period where it's hard to know how people are going to react to all of this stuff. And in a worst case scenario, they say people will foolishly keep investing in fossil fuels until suddenly the demand crashes and they suddenly realize everything they own is worthless. And when, if it happens this way, they say that we will see a financial crisis that is worse than the housing crisis in 2008. So assuming that people go along in their same, I was going to use an insulting adjective, but I won't. If they go along in the same way that they're going now, that we could have one of the things that'll be a tremendous financial crisis going on. The other thing that is going to happen because of this change in demand for oil and gas is it's going to reshape the geopolitical landscape. Like, you wonder how much influence companies like Saudi Arabia and even Russia might have when their energy production is not contributing to the well-being of the world. And now, most of these vulnerable assets are in remote places, not in big cities and occupied areas like Canadian tar sands, the US shale, the Russian Arctic, and then a lot of offshore oil wells like Brazil and elsewhere, and the North Sea, where the oil extraction is already real expensive. So all of that stuff is going to see impact that is immediate and pretty disastrous. But as I say, they remind us that current oil and gas importers will reap hefty economic dividends from the transition because they're going to be able to use the money they save on overseas fuel purchases to invest in their own country. So the only guy that gets hurt are the oil barons.
Well, it's a question of for countries to just hurry up with the transition to electricity, for electric cars and things of that sort. I think those that are the quickest will experience the least amount of financial pain.
Yes, I think you're right. That's also something they say in the article that I didn't talk about.
Yeah.
So
You
there,
know,
go ahead.
There's countries like Norway that sits on a very, very large oil supply, which they have to, yeah, but wait a minute, Richard. They're no dummies, and they're investing heavy in green energy. As a
Right.
matter of fact, they have the world's highest percentage of EV vehicles.
Right.
So, and these countries have had time to think about that. So if they're smart, they will divert some money for more better purposes.
Right, that's right. Since we've known about this for 50 years, it's possible that somebody could have paid attention before this, like Norway. I think Norway is going to make the fastest transition to all 100% EV car sales, and they expect it in the next few months,
Yeah, right.
not 2035.
Yeah. And I think, Richard, I think even Saudi Arabia, I have read that they're investing money in things other than oil, so they
Right.
know where the wind is blowing.
They know they're in trouble. I believe the problem with Saudi Arabia is they haven't had an economy that's based on anything other than oil and the money they get from oil, and their skills for diversifying, I believe, are not adequate. And again, I'm trying to be nice. Those are good people there, but you learn to deal with based on your environment and the problems you've had to solve. And they haven't had to solve the kind of problems that are needed now.
Meaning that I'll get away. Guys, I have to excuse myself. I have to take a lady home.
Okay.
So sorry about that.
Okay. Have fun on your date.
Okay, I read all the articles, and
Okay.
Your choices are they're very exciting. They really are. So anyway, I'm sorry to leave, but see you next week.
Okay. See you next week, John.
Okay.
So what I'm concerned about with this particular case is it's nice when you have countries who can make an, hold a goal in mind and follow it. We don't have that in the United States. And
Right.
so what's going to happen is that certain states, certain regions are going to continue in the path that they are in spite of the obvious. And it's just going to increase the inequity because it seems as though there aren't enough strong politicians in some of those areas to actually get those areas to change and develop other jobs and so on. Yeah.
I think you're right. It's an immensely complex problem, and some places the leadership is better than other places. Some places the leadership is non-existent.
And in some cases, the leadership is being supported by that.
Oh, it's big in a lot of cases. I'm sure if you looked at it, the amount of money that the energy companies are spending supporting
Yep.
politicians each year, I bet it's at a record high.
Yeah, yeah.
Like Joe mentioned,
You
just
don't
want to
Yes. Yes. Okay. Now let me go to the next story in this series for this week. And this is about the world positive result from COP26, which is the world's biggest banks have actually stepped up and have agreed to do something with all their money. These are literally hundreds of the world's biggest banks and pension funds, all together with $130 trillion in assets. So that's a lot of assets, and they have committed themselves to a key goal in limiting greenhouse gas emissions. And so this is 450 financial institutions in 25 countries, and they are working to set the world on a path to limit global heating to 1.5C. And it turns out finance is key in the economic transition ahead of us. What they have pledged was to take their $140 trillion and then in the next 30 years, aim it all where it's aligned with net zero emissions. And the thing that is important about that is now economists have estimated that we're going to need investment to do what we have to do in the next 3 decades. We're going to need about $100 trillion in investment. And this looks like it could be where the money comes from. It comes from the guys with the money already to use the money in ways we need. What an amazing idea that is. And, you know, the issue with it, of course, is it's still, you can easily argue that it's either too little or it's too slow. And right now they've committed to move a third of that money out of supporting fossil fuels in the next decade. That's pretty significant, but the critics argue it's not really enough. We need to do something big in the next decade or we're in trouble. And they're afraid that the banks, while they're acting in the right direction, are not acting fast enough or big enough. So it's whatever it is, I think it's a good story. And if you pull the money out from under fossil fuels, then fossil fuels will collapse. And that's okay with me. I don't see anybody. Andrew's here, so we don't have anybody voting not here. So we don't have anybody voting for fossil fuels today. Okay. So next may be a related story. And this is our material story. And this material is a new material that will pave the way for better, safer batteries. And as I said to begin with, it's not even graphene. It's something that is developed from trees. And what they have developed is a solid ion conductor that combines copper with cellulose nanofibrils, which are polymer tubes derived from wood. And this is paper thin material that has the ability to conduct ions, which are what you move around in batteries as you're charging and uncharging them. It can move ions around 10 to 100 times better than other polymer fiber ion conductors. So it's a lot better at conducting electricity, and it can be used not only as the electrolyte in a solid battery, it can also be used to make the cathode. So it can be used for two of the critical components in the batteries. And it's not lithium, it's not endangered, it's not any of those things. It's copper and one-dimensional cellulose nanofibrils. And that they've studied a lot of different materials, and this material has a record high ionic conductivity. So it means it's by far the best thing that they have found now. And the researchers are very hopeful that the new material is an important step forward in terms of making solid state batteries for the mass market. And this way it can be the technology that replaces the lithium ion batteries with wood.
Well, it's hopeful. We had a lot of stories also about even graphene improving batteries. And I just wonder how long it'll take before we get these new and improved batteries.
Don't know, but what I suspect on this particular one, there is such an enormous market for batteries, and the battery market is growing so fast, they expect it's going to increase this decade by a factor of 10. And so to say that's fast growth is really understatement. And so because of that, you have all of these companies doing everything they can to be as fast as they can to get a piece of that market. And so what I know from working inside companies like this is for them, there's money on the table, and that means they're paying attention and are going to get it there as fast as they can. The other problem that batteries are going to have is that as you develop new technologies, you know, the conversion is not instantaneous, and they're still going to have to, you know, build their way through the kind of early adapter market change kind of dynamic. So because of that, even after they're available, it'll still take a while. But I think because of the size of the market, this will go fast.
It would be nice if, as they're doing their development, if they would think about the disposability of the batteries after they're useful, because that would be a huge marketing advantage if they could say, you know, and this is not going to be as hard to get rid of as your regular batteries are now.
Well, certainly, again, if what we're talking about is cellulose and copper, I think they can figure out how to deal with that.
Right.
But you're certainly right. You have to think about things in terms of their whole product life now, especially now. And the product life cycle is the kind of one of the critical analyses that they have to make. One of the things I read today that's maybe will be in next week's stack of articles is they've now done a careful review of carbon capture technology and looked at the technologies we have presently in terms of the life cycle. And they've determined they actually take more carbon out than they use. So, you know, that's the kind of work we need.
Yeah.
Okay, now for the big story in space, which is what in the heck do you do if you die? What do they do with your body? And death on Earth we know about, and we know about the human body progressing through a number of stages in decomposition. It starts with rigor mortis and the body gets stiff, and then on one hand, enzymes and proteins that are in the body start to break down cell walls and releasing their content. And at the same time, bacteria that are in the gut, you know, that microbiome you always heard about, then those escape and spread through the body and devour all the soft tissues, and they just leave the bones. And then maybe there are external factors like it's dry and they mummify the soft tissue instead of that. And in most cases, the soft stuff goes away after a while to reveal the skeleton. But it's not going to be this way in space. For example, if you die inside your spacesuit, then you'll still have rigor mortis, and the bacteria in the gut would still devour your soft tissues. But these bacteria need oxygen to function, and there's a limited supply of oxygen inside your space suit, so they're not going to work anymore. And if you're on some place like Mars and you die on Mars, then the extreme dryness there means maybe your body would be mummified. And if you're in different environments, normally the organic components, the skin and meat and stuff, decompose and leave the skeletons like we see in these museums and stuff. But in very acidic soil, it's just the opposite. And we may find those in other planets. And if you're buried in acidic soil, the reverse can happen and the bones disappear first, leaving only the soft tissue. So in Earth, the decomposition of human remains is a part of this balanced ecosystem, but it's not going to be that way in other planets. So it means that as we explore space and go into space, that we're going to have to figure out how to deal with the death and decomposition of human remains. It's not going to happen in the same way, and probably we can't afford the high energy of cremation or all of those things. And so at this point, we know dying in space is different. We don't really have a good solution yet. Maybe we need to have more practice. Practice makes perfect.
You can fire anything at the sun to get rid of it.
That's right. And it's down, and once you're in space, it's downhill to the sun.
Yeah.
Down the gravity hill. But what if you're, say, in the Oort cloud or somewhere in deep space? Anyway, one of the things I remember from a science fiction story was some astronaut dying in space in his spacesuit, and he was pulled into the gravity of the Earth. And as he was burning to a crisp in the re-entry, some couple saw the shooting star and made a wish. Okay. So from death to life, we are going to move. And in Mozambique, the selective poaching of elephants with tusks has led to a higher number of females born without them. And in Mozambique, there was a terrible civil war in the early 1990s. And to support the civil war, they engaged in large-scale elephant poaching. And Mozambique's elephant population crashed during that time from more than 2,500 elephants to around 200 elephants because of the elephant poaching. And it turns out before the war, about 18.5% of the females were naturally tuskless. And after the war, the number of tuskless females has about doubled. And so biologists are sure that this is a result of hunting pressure and the selective killing of elephants with tusks, and it's bringing about offspring who will be safer from the elephant hunting. And while that might sound good, all of these things, all of these changes may have unintended consequences. Here, it turns out that tuskless elephants like different foods than elephants with tusks. And elephants eat a lot, and the impact of elephants eating on the environment is significant. And so if the elephants eat something different, what's that going to do to the elephant habitat? It's another thing nobody knows. We'll find out. But evolution in action.
I see that one of the negatives is that the female elephants without tusk, they also lack a powerful weapon if they're attacked by a lion, because I think we've all seen what happens if a lion attack an elephant. You know, they get, you know, killed by the tusk. So I don't know how that balances out.
Well, the elephants are a social species, so hopefully the other elephants around them reduce the damage some.
So do we know why it's the female elephants only?
They believe that they did some genetic analysis, and it looks like it's related to one or two different genes in the X chromosome. And so it's only a gene that the lady elephants carry. But the male elephants have tusks, and there's lots that I don't understand about elephant genetics, including everything. Okay.
I wonder why they grew them in the first place. I mean, unless they're a weapon to fight, you know, other elephants or something like that, I can't see much use for them.
But like was said here, Mary Ellen said they were protecting themselves from those lions and tigers. So, you know, you have to think more generally that for them to have them, either they have some benefit in their life cycle or their secondary sexual characteristics, and it makes the other elephants say, hey, she's really hot.
I wonder, is there such a thing as a rhinoceros with no horn?
There are ones that I've seen with the horn sawed off, but I don't think that's natural.
No.
Okay, so let's continue moving along. And so now it turns out researchers have been able to boost human mental function with brain stimulation. And like I say, I want some of that. Okay. And this was actually a small human study. It was just with 12 patients who were undergoing brain surgery for epilepsy. And as a part of the procedure, they placed hundreds of tiny electrodes all through the brain. And one of the things as they were working, they identified a particular brain region called the internal capsule that improved patients' mental function when stimulated with a little electricity. And this part of the brain is responsible, they say, for cognitive control, for your ability to direct your mind where you want to direct it. An example of a person who has a problem here might be somebody with depression who just can't get themselves unstuck from whatever thoughts that are bringing about the discussion. Here, a little shock to this part of the brain looks like it makes them more able to change in areas where they were stuck. And the system is actually fairly cool. It's able to read the brain activity, then from that data, understand, decode when a patient is having difficulty, and then when the patient is having difficulty, give them a little electric boost, and then it helps them pass that difficulty. And so the whole thing is pretty interesting, and it shows that there is at least one specific human mental function linked to mental illnesses that can be enhanced by using precisely targeted electric stimulation. And it shows, of course, there are parts of the brain that are particularly effective to do this with. And what they found in terms of the design of what they did was they used a closed loop process. So you're getting feedback from the brain and then applying stimulation and monitoring what's happening, and then only applying stimulation if you need it again. So this is closed loop instead of just doing it on a scheduler at some time. And they found this closed loop system was twice as effective as just random stimulation. So they've learned quite a lot from this, and they think that this is going to be a total new approach in mental illness. And now, one of the things that's interesting is of their patients, some of them reported real significant anxiety in addition to their epilepsy. And after they got this cognitive enhancing stimulation, they reported their anxiety got better because they were more able to shift the thoughts away from their distress and focus on what they wanted. So we had real reports from real people saying, not only did this provide some kind of theoretical benefit, it provided actual significant practical benefit in their lives. So the whole area of brain stimulation, I think, is a big area that where there are many things that are going on. I've heard of people using sound. I've heard of people using ultrasound. Last week we had a story on ultra infrared light being used. So they're trying to understand the brain and how the brain can be influenced externally by applying different kind of energies into it. And they see clearly that they can do that. And out of this, there are going to come a whole range of therapies. And unless I miss my bet, also a whole range of what you might call augmentations. So I can be better than just human.
Mhm.
And the augmenters are a bunch of rich guys, so they can afford to experiment. Okay, so moving on from making our brains better to making everything better. And, you know, no one knows why some people age more than other people age faster. One explanation that they think may be the case is due to the ability and efficiency of each person's response to damage sustained by the cell during its life. And this damage eventually causes them to age. And specifically, one of the ways they see their age is something they call senescence. And that's when cells age and are no longer able to do the work of that cell, but they just take up space and resources. And what they have found in experimentally is if you're able to reduce the number of senescent cells, then you reduce parts of the aging process. And so what they have found is working with approaches that they developed working on genetic and immune cancer therapies, they found a way to use antibodies to make a drug that can be used to slow down this cellular senescence. And so they found these antibodies were able to identify the surface of the senescent cells and then release selectively a chemical that caused them to die. And when you do that, then the critter gets more youthful and more healthy. And again, they're doing this basically through an antibody. And they think, or if they don't think, I think that antibodies are the kind of things that are produced by your immune system. So I think the implication of this is a vaccine that we can take against aging. And I know I'm ready for my anti-aging jab right now. How about you?
Anytime.
Well, it always fascinates me that there's these places on Earth where people do live a lot longer, like Okinawa, and often it's island places, and the lifestyle is very simple and stress-free.
And they eat a lot of fish.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I don't know how the research fits in with that. Yeah.
I think it's from another dimension.
Yeah.
But again, I'm ready to take my anti-aging jab. And again, if they're able to reverse aging with antibodies, then that is immensely hopeful. And I don't know if it means we have to go get an antibody infusion at the hospital. But
So-
maybe it'd be worth it.
I remember a science fiction story where people were prevented from aging by going in a thing like a phone box, and it got rid of all the dead cells, and so it was like refreshing.
Oh, that's the perfect thing. That's exactly what we're talking about here, is getting rid of the dead cells and using the human immune system to do it. So we don't need a box, we just need a jab.
Owner and manager are here.
So it'll be
Yeah,
very interesting to see if people who are resistant to getting vaccines for COVID might be more amenable to getting vaccines for anti-aging.
Right, I think it's a different question.
Yeah.
What we do know is that people are still capable of being remarkably stupid, but not us.
Long-term planners. Yeah.
Yeah, not us.
Now we're not going to get old anyway, right?
That's right. Not if we keep using our minds the way that we're using them today.
Yeah. Richard, I want to thank you. You have some excellent, very interesting stories, and I enjoy reading them. So
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Very good.
A lot of hope today. Yeah.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Good. I like that. It's always not so much hope, but I try to find positive stories, but I still give you the stories I can find, whether they're positive or not. Anyway, thank you.
There's always lots of fun ones to read.